Okay, welcome back. This is going to be part 3 of 5 for AP Environmental Science Unit 3 Populations. These are the notes. I highly recommend you take some notes while you watch the video so that you get some of these concepts and hopefully remember them. Alright, so this 100% video is going to be all about age structure diagrams, which are a very important and useful graph that we can use to kind of study population and how human population in particular changes based on the age of a population. So an age structure diagram is very simple. It just shows the age and gender of a population, and it shows at any given time. So this is the age structure diagram of the United States in 2016. Each of these 5-year periods, so 0 to 4, 5 to 9, so on and so forth, these are called cohorts. If you recall from our vocabulary, these are cohorts. So I'll even write that down, that a cohort is an age group. So we can look at the population in 2016, and you can see that ages 0 to 4, there was about, let's say that's probably 10.5 million males, and about probably 10, maybe not a little less than 10 million females. You can pick any age to find out, people that were 70 to 74. If you look here, this is going to denote that there's about 5 million males, and over on this side, there were about like 6.5 million females. So we actually can use these to interpret life expectancies. As you can see, there are more females that live longer than males. There is a certain point on this graph that you can usually find where in particular. Because this is 2016, if we wanted to, we could actually see the baby boomers, which was when we had a huge population growth. We'll talk about the baby boom. But this is this growth here. And then we see these are mostly the millennials. And then down here, hey, these are you guys. So this just shows you, if you look at it, it kind of looks like the population is starting to decline. And we can use these graphs to determine future shifts in the age structure diagram. Because this population, so the baby boom population, which we will look at specifically later on, but the baby boom population has actually moved through this age structure diagram over time, and this is a huge resource, not just to population studies, but also for marketing. If you notice, whenever you watch TV, you probably notice more ads for people that are targeted towards people that are in that higher age group. So you can usually find projections based on the age structure population. So these are 4 examples. So a population that is expanding rapidly typically looks like a uncontrolled parabola. I guess this would be a parabola like this, right? Where we have a lot of young and very few old. Because of this population down here, because there's so many young people, they are going to cause this, as we go year to year, this is going to go up. And we will have more people in that age group. Obviously, there will be death because of natural factors, but that's just showing you, if you see that type of graph, you're looking at a rapidly growing population. Some examples are like Guatemala, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia. A slower expansion is more of a controlled triangle shape, and like the United States and Australia and China, this shows you a very slow growth. We are not seeing rapid amounts of children being born, so we're looking at more of a slow growth. There still is an expansion. A stable population, you might see a triangular shape at the top, but for the most part, you see a fairly rectangular shape in the population for the young and the middle-aged. So this is a population that is fairly stable, like Japan or Italy or Greece. And then finally, a declining population, which, if you guys remembered from the graph before, it almost looks like the United States is starting to enter a decline. A declining population has less and less people in each age group. If there are less young people, it means that there will be less people in the middle age when we get to the next, give it another 10, 20, 30 years, and that will shift through this population graph, and we will see a decline in population overall. Most of these age structure diagrams are broken into three groups, where we have pre-reproductive, reproductive, and then post-reproductive. So we're looking at this population. When you have a large number of people in the reproductive age, you usually see a direct correlation to an increase in the pre-reproductive age, because these people are reproducing and these are their offspring. So for rapidly growing populations, as a rule, they'll have a higher proportion of younger people compared to stable or declining populations. So like I said, it kind of looks like a very skinny parabola at the top and very wide on the bottom. It almost looks like a normal distribution curve, right? Where you get this nice high amount of young people and low amount of older people. So this population, you can imagine, will be expanding, because every 5 years this number is going to move up, and it is usually very likely that as the young pre-reproductive aged people reach the reproductive age, they are going to reproduce, causing even more young people to be born. A more stable population growth is usually when you see a more triangular group. Each age group is slightly less than the younger age before it, but we don't see a rapid amount of births or deaths happening. We just see a fairly normal triangular type of shape. And then the last type is a declining population group, and a declining population is actually defined by the lower numbers of young people compared to middle-aged and old-aged. Now, obviously, when we looked at the generic shapes for these, we see some of these countries here, like the United States, it says that it's stable or expanding slowly or even stable, and Japan here, it says that it's stable. But when we look at some of the more recent data and some of the more realistic data, Japan is obviously entering into a decline in population, and this is something that causes many economic problems, many cultural problems, and this is something that has to be addressed by a government. A government has to think of these age structure diagrams to decide what is going to happen, how are we going to take care of people. You can imagine that if this were the United States, for instance, once you hit about 65, right about here, all of these people in the upper area would be retired. Now, the people that are in the working age down here are essentially the people that have to support those people, right? Depending on the cultural norms. If this was the United States, these are the people in the middle group that are paying Social Security, and in the upper group, these are the people collecting. And if you have less people in the paying into than you have in the collecting, then we start to see a decline in the amount of Social Security available, and this is something that many economists talk about, especially with the fact that the United States, if we look back, does appear to be entering, it's a fairly stable growth, but there is a obvious downturn of population here. So that would be a declining population. So you can imagine that every 5 years, each of these cohorts is going to move up. Now, once you get to about 65 to 69, these populations are going to drop, and that is just because of life expectancy dropping. This is all the way back related to way back when we talked about the survivorship curve. For humans, because in a survivorship curve, we have a high survivorship at young ages, that's where we can usually assume that in these age graphs, age structure diagrams, we can assume that these cohorts will stay relatively the same until they reach a certain point. And when we look at our, survivorship curve, we see that decline. Well, that decline here kind of denotes this age right here. We should see a fairly stable population, which we do. So these, you can imagine, if this is how many 0 to 4, this number is not going to go that way when we get to the next 5 years. It is going to either go straight up or slightly in, because there will either be the same number of people or less. You can't just have people show up in a different cohort. So we can use these age structure diagrams to make different predictions, like I said. When we're looking at developed versus undeveloped or less developed countries, typically we see a more rapid growth in less developed countries than we do in developed countries. We also see an earlier drop-off because in a less developed country, you have less survivorship. A less developed country is going to actually have a survivorship curve that's a little bit closer to a type 2. And that's all based on the resources that are available to those people, along with the healthcare and just overall cultural differences. In a more developed country, we usually see stabler age structure diagrams, and that's why these two types kind of give you an idea of what's happening in one of these countries. So a really good case structure or age structure case study that we can talk about is the American baby boom. It's a good case study because it's something that's happened fairly recently in the United States. After World War II, 79 million people were added to the population of the United States, which is a rapid amount of growth. These are 36% of the adults. Okay. Now, this affects the politics and the economics of the United States, and many of these people are becoming senior citizens, which is also referred to as the graying of America. So in here, you can see that the baby boom is denoted by the yellow cohorts. We can watch as the baby boom goes through our population over time. So in 1955, they were the young. And so you actually see this rapidly growing age structure diagram. In 85, we start to see this decline, which is normal. We had a anomalous, huge growth of people. The baby boomers were 20 to 30, but we also know that these people, because they are in reproductive age, are going to have more children. That's why when we go another 30 years, we start to see that the population as a whole has increased. This is why the United States didn't immediately see a decline right afterward. The baby boomers are now in 2015, and this is, obviously closer to us than 2035 or 1985. They are starting to enter the senior citizen age. These are people that are starting to retire, 50 and 60 years old, 70 years old. The baby boomers are now at a point where they are starting to enter the end of their age structure diagram. Now, when we hit 2035, we expect, because our life expectancies have increased, a lot of these people are going to have higher life expectancies than what was originally or what used to be. We also expect our population to stabilize, but our population, if you look, is not going to fall back to what it was. This is obviously just one interpretation or hypothesis. Many different things are very likely. This could actually turn into a decline. This could also turn into rapid growth. It all depends on what happens and what changes. All right, so that's the end of part 3 for the Unit 3 Populations study guide, notes. Make sure you check out part 4 next.